Story. I'm going back to my ex. Millionaire husband said after 10 years. I never loved you. Pregnant wife just nodded. Before we begin, imagine learning that your husband plans to abandon you, not in private, but beneath chandeliers, in front of reporters, while you are carrying his child. Stay with this story, because Emily Harrison's three-word answer will uncover a truth hidden inside a billion-dollar company and force everyone to decide what justice should look like. If you enjoy stories where quiet courage defeats public humiliation, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. Now a champagne glass was falling, the ballroom was turning silent, and Ryan Montgomery believed he controlled what happened next. The champagne glass shattered across the polished marble floor. Crystal fragments caught the golden chandelier light. 300 guests turned instinctively toward the sound. Conversations and camera shutters stopped for a heartbeat. Tonight was supposed to celebrate 10 years of marriage between Ryan Montgomery, the celebrated founder of the privately held Montgomery Capital, and his wife, Emily Harrison. Instead, it became the night America would never forget. Ryan stood confidently on the stage, dressed in a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo. Success had become part of his posture. Magazine covers called him the billionaire who could predict markets before anyone else. Investors admired him. Employees feared disappointing him. Reporters waited eagerly for every word that left his mouth. Emily stood several feet away, one hand resting gently on the curve of her pregnancy beneath an elegant ivory gown. Her long blonde hair fell softly over her shoulders, framing a face that remained remarkably calm despite the attention surrounding her. No one could read her pale blue eyes. Ryan smiled politely toward the audience. I appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Applause echoed across the ballroom. He raised his glass. 10 years is a long time. Another round of applause followed. Then his expression changed. But sometimes we spend years pretending. The room grew noticeably quieter. Ryan glanced toward the entrance. A woman wearing a fitted emerald evening dress stepped into the ballroom. Vanessa Brooks, his college sweetheart. The woman whose name Emily had heard only a handful of times during their marriage. Ryan walked toward Vanessa without hesitation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He gently took Vanessa's hand before facing the audience once more. I've decided to stop living a lie, he said calmly. I'm going back to the woman I should never have left. The silence became almost physical. Cameras immediately swung toward Emily. Ryan looked directly at his pregnant wife. I never loved you. No music played. No glasses clinked. Only the distant hum of the ballroom's air conditioning remained. Several guests lowered their eyes, unable to watch. Others reached instinctively for their phones. Every reporter sensed history unfolding. Emily did not cry. She did not argue. She did not ask why. Instead, she slowly lifted her chin and met Ryan's eyes for what felt like an eternity. A faint smile touched her lips. Then she nodded. Thank you, she said quietly. Only 3 words. Soft enough to almost disappear beneath the chandeliers. Ryan frowned. That was not the reaction he expected. There was no desperation, no pleading, no anger, only peace. Emily turned gracefully and walked toward the ballroom exit, her heels clicking gently against the marble floor. Behind her, whispers exploded throughout the room. What does she mean? Why is she smiling? Did she already know? Ryan watched her leave, irritation replacing confidence. He told himself she was pretending to stay strong. He never noticed the vibration of his chief legal officer's phone. One email, one attachment, one legal notice prepared months before this evening. As Emily disappeared through the grand doors into the cool Manhattan night, she placed a protective hand over her unborn child and whispered to herself with unwavering calm. Now the truth can begin. The loudest storms often begin in the quietest rooms. By the time Emily Harrison reached the penthouse overlooking Central Park, Manhattan had already buried the gala beneath a curtain of cold rain. Headlights stretched across the wet streets like ribbons of liquid gold, while television helicopters circled downtown, chasing the scandal that was already becoming tomorrow's biggest headline. She closed the front door gently. For the first time that evening, there was absolute silence. No reporters, no whispered sympathy, no cameras searching for tears. Only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock Ryan had bought after their 5th anniversary. Emily slipped off her heels and rested one hand over the gentle curve of her stomach. The baby moved, a slow, reassuring flutter. She smiled for the first time all night. "I'm here," she whispered. The nursery stood at the end of the hallway, exactly as she had left it that morning. Cream-colored walls reflected the warm glow of a small lamp beside the rocking chair. Tiny books waited neatly on floating shelves. A white wooden crib stood beneath the window overlooking the city skyline. Everything looked peaceful, almost untouched by the words that had shattered an entire marriage only an hour earlier. Emily walked to the dresser and folded a small knitted blanket with careful hands. Every movement felt deliberate, not rushed, not broken, prepared. She opened the lowest drawer and lifted a faded music box carved with tiny wildflowers. Ryan believed it had belonged to her grandmother. He had never asked why she refused to throw it away. The melody no longer played. It hadn't for years. Emily pressed a hidden latch beneath the wooden base. A narrow compartment quietly opened. Inside rested a slim silver flash drive, several sealed envelopes, and a leather folder protected inside a waterproof sleeve. She carried everything to the nursery chair before sitting down slowly. Outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan. Inside, she calmly unfolded the first document. 10 years earlier. The words immediately brought her back to another rainy evening. Ryan had not been a billionaire then. His first hotel had been drowning in debt. Banks refused another extension. Investors had disappeared. Everyone believed the young entrepreneur would fail before turning 30. Everyone except Emily. She remembered spending endless nights redesigning marketing proposals, preparing presentations, and convincing skeptical investors to attend one last meeting. She remembered introducing Ryan to executives her own family had known for decades, quietly opening doors he never realized had once been locked. He had promised they were building everything together. Over time, those promises slowly disappeared from conversations, then from interviews, then from company history itself. Emily looked toward the framed wedding photograph standing beside the crib. The smiling couple inside seemed like strangers now. She opened another envelope. Printed emails, corporate filings, meeting notes. Every page had been organized chronologically months before tonight. Not after Ryan's announcement. Before it. Long before it. She had discovered the affair almost half a year earlier. Not through gossip. Not through suspicion. Through forgotten calendar invitations and confidential travel reimbursements that never matched Ryan's explanations. She never confronted him. She simply watched, listened, collected facts. She had learned something unexpected. People willing to betray quietly usually exposed themselves loudly when they believed no consequences remained. Tonight, Ryan had done exactly that. Emily placed every document back into the folder before taking out the final page. The original license had been granted for 10 years, with renewal available only after both sides certified accurate ownership records, proper attribution, and compliance with the agreement. The term would expire in 30 days. 6 months earlier, after discovering that Montgomery Capital continued describing Harrison intellectual property as company-owned, Emily had instructed counsel to begin a formal review. Ryan's affair did not cancel a business contract. His public betrayal simply confirmed that she would no longer protect either the marriage or the false corporate history. She traced the renewal date with one fingertip. Not because she enjoyed what it meant, because she understood what would happen next. Across the city, Ryan was probably celebrating a future he believed had finally begun. He had no idea that the foundation beneath his empire had already started shifting. Emily closed the folder. The baby kicked again. She rested both hands over her stomach and quietly exhaled. "Tomorrow," she whispered softly, "the truth starts walking beside us." Far below the penthouse windows, another flash of lightning illuminated the Manhattan skyline. At that exact moment, an encrypted legal package left her attorney's office, addressed to every member of Montgomery Capital's board of directors before sunrise. By sunrise, the internet had already chosen its villain. The first rays of morning slipped between Manhattan's glass towers, painting Montgomery Capital's headquarters in pale gold. Commuters hurried through the streets below with coffee cups in hand, unaware that inside the 62nd floor, confidence was beginning to fracture. Ryan Montgomery stepped out of the executive elevator as if nothing had changed. His charcoal suit was flawless. His smile remained effortless. To everyone passing by, he looked exactly like the billionaire who had built one of America's fastest-growing real estate investment firms. Only one detail was different. People stopped talking when he walked past. The receptionist forced a smile. The security manager avoided eye contact. Two assistants abruptly lowered their voices. Ryan noticed. He simply ignored it. "Morning," he said while entering the executive conference room. No one answered immediately. The massive screen at the end of the room displayed financial updates, market indexes, and international headlines. Normally, Ryan enjoyed beginning each day with portfolio numbers and private valuation reports. Today, another headline had replaced them. Billionaire leaves pregnant wife at anniversary gala. Millions of views. Thousands of comments every minute. Clips of Emily quietly nodding had spread across every major social media platform overnight. People weren't talking about Ryan's announcement anymore. They were asking why Emily had smiled. His chief communications officer cleared her throat. "The public response isn't developing the way we expected." Ryan remained calm. "Negative headlines disappear." "They usually do," she answered carefully. "This one isn't." Another executive slid a tablet across the polished table. Several major clients had requested clarification regarding corporate governance. One investment fund postponed signing documents scheduled for that afternoon. A charitable foundation quietly suspended negotiations. Ryan barely glanced at the reports. They're reacting emotionally. His chief financial officer spoke next. "No." He hesitated. "They're reacting legally." The room became still. The board received confidential legal notifications before dawn. Ryan looked up for the first time. "What notifications?" "We haven't seen the complete documents." "Who sent them?" "They came from a Manhattan law firm representing Mrs. Harrison." Ryan frowned. Emily had never involved lawyers in anything before. Not once during 10 years together. He leaned back. "She's trying to pressure me." No one replied. At almost the same moment, 30 blocks away, Emily sat beside the nursery window with a cup of untouched tea. Morning light rested softly across the room while she quietly watched rainwater slide down the glass. Her phone vibrated. One message. Package delivered to all board members. She locked the screen without responding. The baby shifted gently beneath her heart. She smiled faintly. Meanwhile, inside Montgomery Capital, another notification appeared. A major lending institution requested an immediate review of licensing agreements connected to several flagship developments. Ryan's confidence finally cracked. "What licensing agreements?" The chief legal officer opened his laptop. "We're trying to determine exactly what's being questioned." "Trying." "We've located references to original partnership documents." Ryan shook his head. "There are no partnership issues." The attorney remained silent. After several uncomfortable seconds, he answered carefully. "There are documents we haven't reviewed in years." Ryan's expression hardened. "Find them." Across the conference table, executives exchanged uncertain glances. No one wanted to be the first to admit the obvious. Every billion-dollar project rested upon contracts signed long before the company became famous. Contracts almost everyone had forgotten. Almost everyone except Emily. Across New York, television anchors replayed footage from the anniversary gala. Commentators debated Ryan's words. Psychologists analyzed Emily's remarkable composure. Business analysts asked an entirely different question. What did she know before everyone else? By early afternoon, 2 lenders had paused approvals, and a private investment partner had requested an emergency valuation update. Nothing had collapsed, but unanswered questions were already more dangerous than bad news, everyone understood. Ryan stood alone in his corner office overlooking Central Park. For the first time since building the company, the skyline looked unfamiliar. His assistant knocked softly. "The chairman of the board is here." "So?" "He says the emergency meeting can't wait." Ryan straightened his jacket. "This will be over in an hour." He genuinely believed it. As he walked toward the boardroom, he never noticed the sealed archive box resting on the conference table. Inside were contracts carrying signatures that had remained untouched for nearly a decade. One forgotten signature was about to become the most valuable name in the entire company. Sometimes the person everyone pities is already 3 steps ahead. The boardroom on the 62nd floor of Montgomery Capital had witnessed billion-dollar acquisitions, hostile takeovers, and victories that shaped skylines across America. Yet on that gray Manhattan afternoon, the room felt strangely smaller, as if the walls themselves had begun closing in. Ryan Montgomery entered with the confidence of a man who believed every crisis could be solved with authority. The 12 board members were already seated. No one stood to greet him. That had never happened before. A long black archive box rested silently in the center of the polished walnut table. Its worn corners suggested it had not been opened in years. Ryan loosened his tie. "So," he said with an easy smile, "let's deal with whatever misunderstanding this is." No one answered immediately. Instead, Chairman Harold Bennett slowly removed a pair of reading glasses and looked directly at him. "We've reviewed the legal package." Ryan folded his arms. "And the documents raise questions we cannot ignore." The company's chief legal officer carefully slid several photocopied contracts across the table. Ryan glanced at the first page. Nothing unusual. Second page. Still routine. Then he reached the final signature sheet. His own signature. Another signature beneath it. Emily Harrison. He frowned. "What exactly am I looking at?" Harold answered quietly. "The original licensing agreement for Montgomery Capital's primary hospitality brand." Ryan looked confused. "I signed hundreds of contracts. You signed this one together." Across town, Emily quietly zipped a small overnight bag inside the nursery. She packed only necessities. Baby clothes, medical records, the faded music box, the leather folder, nothing else. She walked through the penthouse one final time. The marble staircase, the oversized portraits, the designer furniture chosen for magazine covers instead of comfort. Every room echoed with memories. Yet none of them felt like home anymore. She paused briefly in the living room. 10 years earlier, Ryan had carried her across this very floor after buying their first apartment. He had laughed, promised they would grow old together. She smiled sadly at the memory. Some promises expire long before the people who make them realize it. Back inside the boardroom, another document appeared. "This trust agreement," the legal officer continued, "establishes that Harrison Heritage Holdings granted Montgomery Capital a 10-year exclusive license to use specified hospitality concepts, trademarks, data systems, and related intellectual property. The term expires next month unless both parties sign a renewal." Ryan barely listened. "So?" Harold leaned forward. "The trust belongs to Emily." Silence. Ryan laughed once. A short, dismissive laugh. "Impossible." "It isn't. The company is mine." "No," Harold replied evenly. "The company is yours. The foundation beneath it is not." For the first time that afternoon, Ryan's confidence faltered. He picked up the contract again. The signatures were genuine. The notarization authentic. Every page carried official seals. How had he forgotten? No. A more frightening thought entered his mind. Had he ever truly read them? Meanwhile, Emily stepped into the elevator carrying only one suitcase. The concierge rushed forward. "Mrs. Montgomery, should I call your driver?" Emily smiled politely. "No, I'll be driving myself." Outside, rain had finally stopped. Fresh sunlight reflected across the wet pavement. She placed her suitcase inside her SUV before looking up at the towering glass building she had once called home. She didn't feel anger, only relief. Behind every painful ending waited the first honest beginning. Across Manhattan, Ryan's phone suddenly rang. "Vanessa." He rejected the call. It rang again. And again. He silenced it. Nothing outside that boardroom mattered anymore. Harold opened the final envelope. "There is one more issue." Ryan slowly looked up. "What now?" "The license contains a compliance and renewal clause." His heartbeat quickened. "What kind of compliance?" "The company must accurately identify the trust's ownership, preserve audit records, and obtain written approval before expanding the intellectual property into new projects." The review found repeated attribution failures and several deployments that were never submitted for approval. The room became perfectly still. No one moved. No one reached for coffee. No one checked a phone. Every executive understood exactly what those words meant. Ryan stared at the contract as though it belonged to someone else's life. Miles away, Emily started her engine. She didn't look back. As her vehicle disappeared into afternoon traffic, another email arrived simultaneously in every board member's inbox. Subject line, Evidence Package, Part 2. This time, the attachments included archived presentations, board materials, unauthorized project expansions, and copies of Emily's unanswered requests to correct the company's history. A separate package concerning the marriage remained with her divorce attorney. Business accountability and personal betrayal would proceed on different legal tracks. Power rarely disappears all at once. It leaves in quiet pieces. Ryan remained seated long after the board meeting ended. The polished conference table that had once symbolized control now felt like a witness against him. Directors filed out without their usual handshakes. No one offered reassurance. No one promised the situation would improve. Only Harold Bennett stayed behind. "You should prepare for every possibility," the chairman said. Ryan looked up. "You think they'll remove me? I think they'll protect the company." The distinction landed harder than any accusation. Outside the boardroom, employees watched silently as Ryan crossed the executive floor. Conversations stopped. Computer screens suddenly became fascinating. Even the elevators seemed slower than usual. His office door closed with a muted click. For the first time in years, the room felt unfamiliar. The framed magazine covers, the awards, the architectural models of hotels carrying his name. He had once believed they represented success. Now they looked like exhibits from another lifetime. His phone finally came back to life. 37 missed calls. Most were from Vanessa. Others came from journalists, investors, and people who had not spoken to him in months. He ignored them all. Instead, he searched for one name. Emily. His thumb hovered over the call button. He pressed it. The line rang twice before going to voicemail. He tried again. The same result. For the first time since the gala, he realized she wasn't waiting for an apology. She had already moved beyond expecting one. Across the city, Emily sat on the terrace of Evelyn Shaw's townhouse, wrapped in a light sweater as the afternoon breeze drifted through the trees. The city sounded distant. Sirens, traffic, helicopters. None of it reached the quiet space she had finally found. Evelyn placed a folder beside her. The board requested private contractual mediation with separate counsel and a neutral mediator. Emily looked at the papers but didn't open them. "They're frightened. They're practical," Evelyn corrected gently. "They've realized the company cannot function without resolving the ownership issues." Emily rested a hand over her unborn child. "I don't want their company. I know. I only want my name returned to the place where it belonged." Evelyn smiled. Sometimes that's the harder victory. Back at Montgomery Capital, emergency meetings continued throughout the afternoon. Financial analysts projected potential losses if licensing rights were suspended. Banks and private investors requested additional disclosures. Partners postponed negotiations. Nothing had collapsed. Not yet. But uncertainty spread faster than panic ever could. Late that evening, Ryan unlocked a storage cabinet hidden behind a bookshelf in his office. Inside were old notebooks from the company's earliest days. He opened the first one. Every page carried sketches, handwritten ideas, and business plans. Emily's handwriting appeared beside his on nearly every sheet. Corrections, calculations, marketing concepts, investor notes. He kept turning pages. Somehow, he had forgotten how often her pen appeared next to his. Or perhaps he had chosen not to remember. He closed the notebook slowly. Outside the office windows, Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky. For years, he had believed success meant standing alone at the top. Only now did he understand that he had erased the very person who helped him climb there. Across the river, Emily watched the first evening stars emerge above the skyline. She took a slow breath. Tomorrow would bring negotiations, arguments, lawyers, more headlines. But for the first time in months, none of those things frightened her. Because the truth no longer depended on being discovered. It had already begun speaking for itself. The hardest verdicts are not always spoken in courtrooms. Sometimes they arrive in a boardroom after everyone has been given documents, counsel, and the chance to respond. 3 days after the emergency meeting, Montgomery Capital's employees still reported to work and construction projects continued across the country. Yet confidence had thinned. The 10-year Harrison license would expire in less than a month, and no responsible director could assume renewal was guaranteed. Emily arrived at headquarters wearing a simple navy maternity dress beneath a light gray coat. No security entourage followed her. Her attorney, Evelyn Shaw, carried the renewal proposal and the mediator's written summary. In the lobby, an elderly receptionist stood from behind the desk. "I've worked here since the first office," she said. "You always remembered everyone's name." Emily smiled. "So did you." The woman blinked back tears. "Welcome home." Those words carried more weight than every headline published that week. Inside the boardroom, the 12 directors sat beside independent outside counsel. Ryan attended with his own attorney. Chairman Harold Bennett opened the special session by describing its limited purpose. The board would consider a lawful renewal of the license, correct the company's ownership records, and separately decide whether Ryan should remain in leadership during the ongoing governance review. These are different decisions, Harold said. Harrison Heritage Holdings cannot appoint or remove our officers. The board alone has that authority under the company's bylaws. Emily opened her folder. I have no interest in taking Montgomery Capital away from the employees and investors who helped build it, but I will not allow my name, or my child, to inherit a lie. She proposed a 5-year renewal at independently valued commercial terms. The agreement would preserve existing projects, allow new deployments after documented approval, require accurate attribution, establish annual compliance certification, protect employees who cooperated with audits, and send future disputes to neutral arbitration rather than public warfare. A director asked, "Are you demanding control?" No. Harrison Heritage will remain the owner and licensor. Montgomery Capital will remain the operator. Are you demanding Ryan's removal? Emily looked directly at her husband. I am demanding that the person who signs future compliance certifications can do so truthfully. The board must decide who that person should be. Ryan leaned forward. You planned this for 6 months. I began reviewing the license after I found false ownership statements and unauthorized expansions, she replied. I began preparing for divorce after I found evidence of your affair. Those are separate matters. You chose to combine them publicly at our anniversary. The distinction left him with nowhere to hide. Harold asked whether the renewal would remain available if the board retained Ryan. Emily's attorney answered carefully. The proposal requires independent compliance oversight and truthful certification. It does not name any individual. Harrison Heritage will evaluate whether the company satisfies those protections, not punish a spouse. The directors approved the commercial framework subject to final drafting. Existing projects remained authorized under a 90-day standstill while the corrected systems were implemented. Relief moved around the room, but no one mistook it for a complete recovery. Lenders and partners would still need explanations, and trust would return only through performance. Harold then asked Emily, Evelyn, and all conflicted executives to leave. Ryan remained long enough to answer questions with counsel present, then waited outside while the disinterested directors deliberated. 30 minutes later, everyone returned. Harold read a written resolution. The board has found substantial failures in ownership controls, unauthorized expansion of licensed assets, and serious reputational harm arising from Mr. Montgomery's use of a company-sponsored event for a personal announcement. By unanimous vote of the disinterested directors, Ryan Montgomery is placed on immediate administrative leave pending completion of the independent investigation. An interim leadership committee will report directly to the board. Ryan closed his eyes. He wanted to argue that the company carried his vision. Instead, he remembered the old notebooks filled with 2 sets of handwriting. Emily gathered her folder. You wanted this, he said quietly. I wanted the truth documented. The board decided what your leadership failures required. And us. Our attorneys will handle the divorce. Our child's future will be handled according to her best interests, not as part of a corporate negotiation. She walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. I came here to protect the future, she said. Behind her, pens moved across official resolutions. For the first time since Montgomery Capital had been founded, the company began its next chapter with ownership, authority, and responsibility written on separate lines, exactly where they belonged. Some victories are measured not by what you gain, but by what you choose not to destroy. The company issued its statement before the business day began. Montgomery Capital's board had placed Ryan Montgomery on administrative leave pending the completion of an independent investigation. Within minutes, financial networks filled their broadcasts with speculation. Commentators debated the future of the privately held company, while lenders and partners studied the board's promise of independent oversight. Social media focused on something else entirely. Emily Harrison, the woman who could have claimed control of the company, had instead chosen to preserve it. That decision changed the conversation. Inside headquarters, employees gathered in small groups around televisions mounted in the lobby. For the first time in weeks, the headlines no longer described a scandal. They described restraint. Co-founder prioritizes employees over personal revenge. Those words traveled faster than any legal filing. Across the city, Ryan sat alone in the apartment he had rented after leaving the penthouse. The silence felt unfamiliar. No assistants. No board calls. No endless calendar alerts. Only the distant sound of traffic drifting through the windows. His lawyer placed a folder on the dining table. The board wants to negotiate. Ryan barely looked up. What does Emily want? She already told them. His lawyer paused. Recognition. Ryan let out a slow breath. Nothing else. They offered her far more. And she declined. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Ryan slowly realized something that hurt more than losing his title. Emily had never been fighting to become richer. She had been fighting to stop disappearing. Meanwhile, Emily visited one of Montgomery Capital's oldest hotel properties. Many of the employees remembered her from the early years. Back then she had walked construction sites wearing work boots instead of designer shoes. She had brought coffee to exhausted engineers. She had learned the names of housekeepers and maintenance crews. An elderly porter approached her with uncertain steps. I heard you're coming back. Emily smiled gently. I'm only here to make sure everyone can keep doing their jobs. The man's shoulders relaxed. Thank you. Simple words. Honest words. They mattered more than every television interview she had declined. That afternoon, the board invited Emily to address senior management. She stood before executives who had once known her only as the CEO's wife. Now they listened for an entirely different reason. I won't rewrite the past, she said calmly. We'll correct it. No one here needs to choose sides. This company belongs to the people who built it every day. The future won't be built through humiliation. It will be built through honesty. The room remained silent. Then one executive stood. Another followed. Soon every person in the room rose to their feet. No applause, only respect. Across town, Ryan watched the speech on his laptop. He noticed something immediately. Emily never mentioned his affair, never insulted him, never encouraged anyone to hate him. She spoke only about responsibility. For years, he had mistaken kindness for weakness. Now he understood that kindness required far greater strength. As evenings settled over Manhattan, the board issued one final announcement. An interim leadership committee would oversee Montgomery Capital until a permanent decision was reached. Emily accepted an advisory role only. She refused the CEO position. The company needs stability, she explained. Not another symbol. Late that night, Ryan opened the worn notebook he had rediscovered days earlier. Inside the front cover, written in Emily's handwriting from 10 years before, was a single sentence. Success means nothing if we lose ourselves while building it. He traced the faded ink with his fingertips. Only now did he understand that she had protected those words long after he had forgotten them. Outside, the lights of Manhattan reflected across the river. Inside, two different homes, two different futures quietly began. One built on titles that could be taken away. The other built on integrity that no court, boardroom, or headline could ever erase. 1 year later, almost nothing looked the same. The glass facade of Montgomery Capital still reflected the Manhattan skyline each morning, but inside, the company had changed in quieter ways. The founder wall in the lobby now displayed two names instead of one. Ryan Montgomery, Emily Harrison. No plaques had been removed. Nothing had been rewritten beyond the truth. Visitors rarely noticed the difference. Employees always did. Emily had never accepted the position of chief executive officer. Instead, she remained an advisor to the board, focusing on long-term strategy while spending most of her time raising the little boy who had entered the world only months after the storm had passed. Her son laughed easily. He knew nothing about lawsuits, headlines, or betrayal. He knew only that every evening his mother read him stories before bed. Those moments mattered more to her than every business magazine that now called her the woman who saved Montgomery Capital. Across the city, Ryan's life had become remarkably ordinary. The investigation had concluded months earlier. It found no theft or falsified financial statements, but it documented serious governance failures, unauthorized expansion of licensed assets, and repeated disregard for ownership controls. Ryan resigned permanently, and his reputation never fully recovered. Consulting offers were scarce. Television interviews stopped. People who once competed for a seat at his table gradually disappeared. He learned that success attracts crowds. Character reveals who remains when the crowds leave. Emily and Ryan had also completed a no-fault divorce with separate attorneys. Their written settlement addressed property, support, and a parenting plan approved after their son's birth. Emily held primary physical custody while Ryan received scheduled parenting time that expanded as he became consistent. The agreement treated the child as a person to protect, never as leverage in the business dispute. On a cool autumn afternoon, Ryan walked through Central Park carrying a small wrapped gift. He had asked Emily weeks earlier if he could see their son. She had agreed, not because the past had been erased, because the child deserved the chance to know his father. Emily was already waiting near a quiet pond. Their son chased fallen leaves across the grass, laughing every time the wind carried them away. Ryan stopped a few feet away. For a long moment, neither adult spoke. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "He's been asking about you." Ryan looked toward the little boy. "What did you tell him?" "The truth." "And what is that?" "That his father is still learning." Ryan lowered his eyes. There was no accusation in her voice, only honesty. He knelt as the little boy ran toward him. The child looked at the gift, then at Ryan's face. "Is this for me?" Ryan smiled, perhaps more genuinely than he had in years. "It is." The boy accepted it with the uncomplicated joy that only children possess. No resentment, no judgment, just trust. Emily watched quietly from a distance. She understood that forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. Some relationships could never return to what they had been. Yet kindness could still exist where love had once lived. As the afternoon sun settled behind the trees, Ryan walked beside his son while Emily followed several steps behind. No reporters waited nearby. The world had already moved on to newer stories. That seemed fitting. The greatest changes rarely happen beneath bright lights. They happen in ordinary moments, witnessed only by the people living them. When it was time to leave, Ryan handed the boy back to Emily. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Take care of yourself." There was nothing more to add. No dramatic farewell. No final argument. Only acceptance. As Emily and her son walked toward the parking lot, Ryan remained where he was, watching until they disappeared beyond the trees. For years, he had believed wealth was measured by buildings, contracts, and headlines. Standing alone in the fading light, he finally understood another measure entirely. A person's greatest legacy is not the empire they build. It is whether the people whose lives they touched can remember them with dignity when everything else is gone.